Shunter is an absolute nightmare. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it before. Well, I definitely agree with you there, Doug. It might be the worst this island's ever had. I've never known such an engine to be so rude. Yes, that's 100% true. God, I don't know what mates at Topham had ever think to buy him.
Well, I can definitely agree. He's not the nicest of chaps. But he's far from the worst shunter this island's ever seen. Far from the worst.
I beg your pardon, Edward. You're trying to tell me that there was a Shunter worse than him? I didn't even think that was possible. Yeah, I second that opinion. It can't be right. He's just the worst.
In that case, I suppose you two have never heard of the tale of the Shunter from Hell. At least, that's what we called it back then.
Sorry? The Shunter from Hell? I've never heard of that tale. Can you tell it?
Very well, if you insist, but I warn you, this tale does not have a happy ending. In fact, most of it is pretty tragic.
Well, as residents on the island, I think we better know, but I already have a deep feeling in my engine that I'm not gonna like where this goes.
Don't worry, Edward. I'm right here beside you. Just tell them. They're bound to find out eventually, and we're probably the only ones who can tell it correctly. We were there, after all. Well, this tale begins in the Northwestern's earliest days, when the railway was still being built, and most engines were only on loan. Me and Thomas were the first ones on the line, you know. And with that we saw many things. Many engines coming and going, many sticking around longer than normal. However, there was one who was, how do I put this, rather strange. He felt almost, I can't put it quite, but it was like the devil was always around him. He had an awful smile and never seemed to be nice to anybody. But it wasn't just insults. He would threaten and sometimes even get physical by biffing other engines into buffers or derailing them by jamming points. He was quite horrid. And I remember most big engines tried to stand up to him, but they met with the same fate as many of us. They were told to go away or given some rather harsh threats. Some were even scrap. It was never fun to be around this engine, and I, personally, wanted to avoid him like the plague. Most did. Unfortunately, not everyone could have done that for so long. Over the days, he got increasingly violent, started getting more physical than normal. I remember once he rammed a passenger train into the siding and derailed the coaches, deliberately to trap an engine in the shed, all because the engine had said that he didn't want to shunt his own train. He always yelled at the fat director, and honestly, it made him wonder if he'd ever want to keep him on the railway. The fat director decided that maybe he should have sold the engine away or got rid of him. And that's, well, what the original plan was. However, it didn't really turn out like that. Instead, he wasn't sent away. Well, he wasn't sent away as a full engine. One afternoon, I was told by another engineer who used to work on our line that the engine puffed into the sheds where he and another engine, number 98462, were resting. They decided to have a crack at it and tried to tell the engine to be nicer and tried to get through to him. But they were met with the same kind of attitude that the rest of us got. However, 98462, being a slight bully himself, started a fight with the engine and said that one day the engine would be scrapped. Then again, he also remarked he wouldn't be surprised if it happened sooner due to the engine's size. Alfred was in the shed at the time and just seemed, well, shocked. For the first time ever, he saw the shunter not smile, but almost grit his teeth in anger. The engine seemed to growl as he puffed out of the shed, and Alfred was worried. Alfred was later called away on a train. Henry had broken down, and he was called to go and help him. This left 98462 alone in the shed, and the Shunter on the other side of the yard. I was at Knapford at the time, as I was waiting for the local, and I saw the Shunter in the yard, and he seemed to be collecting what I thought were tankers, but were designated fuel trucks. I wondered why, but I just assumed there was going to be a fuel supply sent to the mine. Oh, how wrong I was. The next thing, nobody quite knows what happened, as no one ever saw it, but one thing is for certain. That engine was... Oh, God. I'll never forget what came after he left the yard. There was an ear-piercing explosion. It shook the grounds and... God, I felt like I was about to fall apart. Thomas hurried into Knapford and demanded to know what had happened, as he'd seen the explosion in the distance. The next thing I know, the yard manager ran up and demanded that we got the breakdown train and head to the old Knapford sheds. So we did. Me and Thomas coupled up to the breakdown train and set off. And when we got there, my God, the sight was just horrific. It wasn't very pretty. Didn't seem real at the time, but it was 100% real.
No, you're not telling me that the engine... Oh, God. I'm guessing that the next part of the story is that, well, you didn't exactly find him in one piece. Or did you even find all of him?
Yeah, it was a bit of a sight. I can't remember much because of how traumatizing it was, but all I remember was just seeing the burning wreckage of the sheds and the twisted remains of the engine and 98462. They were both in just... They were just melted. There was nothing left of them, but... God. I can see it in my head now. You'd just be glad you weren't there to see it with your own eyes.
God. Sounds absolutely awful. I'm sorry you to experience such a horrible sight. Yeah, I can only sympathize with you. Not seeing it, but hearing you two describe it, I don't really want to.
Yes, well, it was truly awful. As far as I believe, the remains of 98462 and the Shunter were taken to the scrapyard, and what wasn't already melted metal was put into the foundries. However, that isn't where the tale ends. Not of the Shunter from hell. It's said that it is remorsed for what it did, that its actions, that he feels sorry and wishes to atone for the sins committed. Therefore, if the Shunter on the island is in its same position, rude and unwilling to do and serve what it was meant to, it's said that the angel will appear. No one can confirm this, as those who hear the story take its warning and listen. However, our recent resident, I doubt, would take the story seriously, meaning I expect that number 488 will soon take its showing and soon appear to our newest Shunter.
Well, thank you for telling us, Edward. I can't really say I enjoyed the story, but thank you for informing us. We better get some sleep. We have busy work tomorrow. Good night, everyone. Edward, are you still awake?
Yes, I'm just thinking about everything. I mean, do you really think he's remorseful for what he did? I can't imagine it felt very nice, being blown to bits. But at the same time, it was a conscious decision. He didn't really, well, wasn't forced into it. He just acted out, and I guess this is the cost, but was it all worth it in the end? I can't be sure.